My fiancée and her mom called me cheap at our rehearsal dinner, so I canceled the wedding mid-speech and left them speechless forever. I'm a 30-year-old software engineer, and if there's one thing I've always been proud of, it's this. I know the value of every dollar I've ever earned. My dad raised me on his own after my mom passed when I was 7. He worked double shifts at a packaging plant, loading pallets during the day, cleaning floors at night. We didn't have much, but we always had enough. Enough food on the table, enough warmth in the house, and enough love to fill the gaps money couldn't. He taught me early that being broke wasn't the same as being broken. He'd say, "It's not about how much you make, it's about how well you use it." I watched him pay bills with military precision, fix appliances with YouTube tutorials, and save coins in an old Folgers can labeled vacation fund, even if we only made it to the local lake. Money wasn't a symbol. It was a tool, a safety net, a quiet kind of dignity. When I met Lauren, I thought I'd found someone who respected that. She came from a more upscale world, family-owned businesses, winter vacations in Aspen, designer handbags by default. But she told me she loved that I was grounded, that I didn't throw money around to impress people, that I was real. She said all the right things, but the first time we walked past a thrift shop and she made a face, I laughed it off. When she called my 2012 Toyota charming in a vintage way, I smiled. And when she joked to her friends that she was dating Mr. Coupons, I played along because I loved her. And I truly believed love was enough to bridge the gap between her world and mine, at least. I did back then. In the beginning, it really felt like we balanced each other out. I was the saver, the planner, the one who cooked at home instead of ordering in. Lauren was spontaneous, vibrant, always ready to splurge on last-minute concert tickets or a weekend getaway just to reset. And I'll admit it, her energy was infectious. She pushed me out of my comfort zone. I started saying yes to more things. I even bought a leather jacket once, just because she said I needed to stop dressing like someone's tax accountant. She laughed when I said we should track our shared expenses in a spreadsheet. "Babe, this isn't a merger," she said. "It's a relationship." Still, she let me do it. She called me her little CFO. We had different styles, sure, but I believed that was normal. I thought compromise meant I learned to loosen up a bit, and she learned the value of financial discipline. For a while, we even joked about how our kids would get the best of both worlds, my frugality and her flair. But the cracks were small and sneaky. When we moved in together, I noticed she never offered to split utilities unless I brought it up. If we went out, I paid always. When I suggested we set a monthly spending cap to save for a house, she rolled her eyes and said, "We're not 50-year-olds on a fixed income, babe." I kept thinking, she's just not used to it yet. She'll come around. And when I proposed to her, with a custom ring made using a diamond from my grandmother's necklace, she cried. Said it was the most meaningful thing she'd ever received. I believed her. God help me, I did. But now I wonder if she ever really meant it. Or if she was just impressed I could make cheap look romantic. The moment we got engaged, it was like a switch flipped. Suddenly, Lauren's mom, Carol, was involved in everything. I mean everything. She had a binder the size of a dictionary, full of glossy pages, color-coded tabs, and a list of vendors before we even picked a date. I thought it was enthusiasm at first, but it quickly became control. "I know a florist who did the governor's daughter's wedding," she'd say. "Trust me, you need the peony wall. It photographs like heaven." I'd glance at the price tag. $8,000 for flowers that die in a week. Lauren, who once said she wanted a simple backyard vibe, started using words like opulent and statement lighting. She and Carol went to cake tastings without me. The guest list ballooned from 75 to 200 because networking is everything. I voiced my concerns, gently at first. Suggested we scale down the live jazz trio or ditch the ice sculpture. Lauren gave me a tight smile. "Can we not nickel and dime our own wedding?" One night, I showed her a revised budget I'd worked on, trying to keep the essentials without selling a kidney. She didn't even look up from her phone. Just said, "If this is going to be your vibe the whole time, maybe you should let Mom and me handle it." That hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the way they dismissed me. As if my priorities, financial security, honoring my dad's modest savings, building a foundation, were embarrassing. I kept telling myself, just get through the planning. The marriage will be different. but deep down, I started to feel like I was planning a party I wasn't even invited to, and that party was about to get even more expensive. My dad isn't a flashy man. Never has been. He wears the same 3 flannel shirts on rotation and still uses a flip phone. But when he heard about our wedding plans, he offered to contribute. He pulled me aside one evening and said, "I know I can't cover much, son, but I'd like to help. Maybe host the rehearsal dinner. Or cater with Raj's place. You know, the BBQ joint we used to go to after Little League." I was touched. That place was like home to us. The thought of having something familiar and warm before the big day felt grounding. I brought it up to Lauren later that week, said my dad wanted to handle the rehearsal dinner and use a small local spot. She blinked, then said, "Wait, the one with plastic tablecloths and neon signs?" Her laugh was light, but there was an edge to it. "That's cute. But I already told Mom we'd use the patio at Vintner's Lounge. It's got a champagne wall," I said. "It means a lot to him." She waved her hand. "We'll invite him, obviously. But let's not turn this into a barbecue for peasants." That last part, barbecue for peasants, hit like a brick. She said it so casually, so coldly, I didn't even have time to react. Later, I overheard her on a call with her mom. "Yeah, he's pushing for some redneck restaurant." I know, it's exhausting. I stood there in the hallway, heart in my throat. That moment was the first time I didn't recognize the woman I proposed to. And for the first time, I wondered if she ever respected my father, or if she just saw him as part of the price tag that came with me. The thing about slowly drowning is, you don't realize how deep you've gone until your feet can't touch the bottom anymore. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being a partner and became an ATM with a pulse. Carol kept suggesting upgrades, real hardwood dance floor, imported linens, a cocktail violinist. She'd email quotes to both of us, always ending with, "Let me know when you've handled it." Not if, but when. I paid for the venue. The groomsmen tux rentals, the vendor deposits, even the bridal suite. I justified every swipe of my card with the idea that this is what love requires. That being a provider meant never saying no. Then came her bachelorette weekend in Miami. Carol promised to pitch in. Didn't. Lauren booked a penthouse suite and spa packages. "It's once in a lifetime," she said. "You want me to show up to our wedding stressed?" I told her it was a bit much. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "You're acting broke." That's not attractive. That word, broke, sent something twisting in my stomach. I wasn't broke. I was just not reckless. There's a difference. But the worst came when I brought up a prenup. I thought it was logical. She came from generational wealth. I had built my savings from the ground up. I wanted us both protected. She exploded. "Are you planning to leave me? Is this your way of saying you don't trust me?" "No," I said quietly. "It's because I've worked for everything I have." Her response? "Please, you're not rich enough to need a prenup." I didn't respond. I just sat there stunned, because that wasn't about legality. That was a dagger. A declaration. That no matter how hard I worked, how much I sacrificed, I'd never be enough in her eyes. I wish I could say I saw it coming. The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be simple, quiet, intimate, meaningful. I booked a modest private room at a local bistro my dad and I had loved since I was a teen. They served handmade pasta, no pretense, just warmth. I even arranged for them to make my dad's favorite garlic rolls as a surprise. When Lauren and Carol arrived, both of them were dressed like they were attending a gala. She barely kissed my cheek. "This is quaint," she whispered, scanning the room like it smelled off. Carol added, "It's got character," in that passive-aggressive tone she'd perfected. I kept trying to stay present. Smiled through the wine toast, clinked glasses with my best man, made small talk with her dad about sports I didn't care for. But my stomach wouldn't settle. Halfway through the night, I stepped into the hallway to get some air. That's when I heard it. Lauren and her mom were standing just around the corner near the restrooms. I could hear everything. "You've done well, sweetie," Carol said. "I know, yeah, he's cheap, but he tries," Lauren laughed. "It's not like he's your forever. He's just stable enough for now." I froze. I couldn't breathe. I didn't move. Didn't barge in. Didn't say a word. I just listened as they mocked my upbringing, my financial caution, and my role in this circus of a wedding like I was a prop. A bank account with a tux. The worst part? She didn't even sound cruel. She sounded bored. I walked back to the table, sat down, nodded when someone asked if I was okay. I wasn't. Something inside me had cracked wide open. And for the first time, I knew this wedding wasn't happening, but they didn't know that yet. I plastered a smile on my face like it was part of a costume. My hands felt clammy, my chest tight, but I kept nodding and laughing when someone cracked a joke. Photos were being taken every few minutes, flashes going off, people hugging and smiling. And there I was, frozen in a grin that didn't reach my eyes. Lauren leaned in, whispering, "Thanks for arranging all this. It's so cute." Cute. As if I were some hired event planner rather than a man about to get publicly humiliated. Carol clinked her wine glass near me. "Everything looks perfect," she said, her eyes glinting with something I couldn't name. Smug satisfaction, maybe, or quiet victory. My best man caught my gaze. "You okay, man?" he asked softly. I nodded, barely. I couldn't betray what I felt. Not yet. Not in front of everyone. The speech I had written, the one full of love, gratitude, and dreams of a shared future, I had rehearsed for weeks. I'd poured everything into it. My father's sacrifices, our first date, our inside jokes. And yet every word suddenly felt heavy, meaningless. The laughter from that corner of the room replayed in my mind, cutting through every sentence I wanted to say. I excused myself to the hallway again, letting the cool air hit my face. My hands shook as I typed out a new speech in my phone, not for them, not for the guests, but for myself. Raw, honest, angry, true. The lights flicked overhead. Guests were gathering for the toasts. Music played softly in the background. I held my phone in my pocket, my heart hammering. I had a choice, walk in and act like everything was fine, or finally say what needed to be said. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of months of compromise, ridicule, and invisible contempt. And I knew the next few minutes would change everything. Something had to break. The morning of the wedding arrived like a heavy fog. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, soft and deceptive, making everything feel calm on the surface. But inside me, my chest was a storm. The smell of fresh coffee and my dad's burnt toast reminded me of home, a home I realized I was about to leave behind forever, though not in the way anyone expected. Guests were trickling into the venue. Bridesmaids were chattering, adjusting dresses, laughing at jokes I didn't get. Hairstylists buzzed through the suite, curling and pinning with precision. Lauren floated past in a blush-colored gown, radiant, unaware that the entire narrative I had built in my mind, the story I'd rehearsed for months, was about to explode. Her mom hovered nearby, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning everyone like a general on inspection. I caught Carol staring at me, raising an eyebrow as if to say, "You belong here." Barely. I wanted to tell her, "No, I don't." I took a deep breath, fingering the edges of my cufflinks. My dad came up behind me, clapping me on the shoulder. "Son," he whispered, "remember what I taught you. Your worth isn't in their applause." I swallowed hard. He didn't know the full plan I'd cooked up in the hallway last night, but somehow he understood. Photographers were adjusting lenses. The officiant shuffled papers. Music swelled gently in the background. Everyone thought it was just another wedding morning, full of nerves and excitement. But I knew better. By the time Lauren took her first steps down the aisle, nothing would ever be the same. And when I stepped up to speak, the entire room would realize just how deep this betrayal had run, and how far I was willing to go to reclaim my dignity. The calm wasn't peace. It was a countdown. The ceremony began like any other. Guests were seated, soft classical music floated through the room, and Lauren appeared at the top of the aisle, radiant in her blush gown, a smile so wide it almost convinced me this was supposed to be a happy day. Her mother's eyes sparkled with pride, or so I thought. Everything looked perfect on the surface. I adjusted my tie and stepped up to the microphone for the groom's speech. Everyone turned their attention to me, smiles and expectant eyes filling the room. My palms were sweating. My heart was racing. For a brief second, I considered faking it, reading a speech about love and unity, nodding politely at her and her mother, and pretending none of the months of ridicule, manipulation, and humiliation had happened. But as I looked out at the crowd, I realized I couldn't lie anymore. Not to them. Not to myself. I cleared my throat. Silence fell. "Before we continue," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest, I have something important to share. Heads tilted, murmurs rippled through the guests. Lauren's smile faltered. Her mom's hand clutched the armrest of her chair, knuckles white. No one had expected this. I took a breath, letting the weight of every slight, every laugh behind my back, every cheap remark build in my chest. This was the moment to speak, not from obligation, but from truth, and for the first time that night I felt a strange clarity. The entire room leaned in, hanging on my next words, unaware that everything they thought about this wedding and me was about to be upended because I was done pretending. I looked out at the crowd, feeling every eye pierce me like a spotlight, and then I started to speak, not the groomly lines I had prepared for months, but the truth, raw and unfiltered. I've spent months planning this day, not just with my fiancée, but under the constant shadow of judgment from the people closest to her, I said, voice calm but firm. I've been called cheap. I've been mocked for my upbringing. My father's generosity, something that should be celebrated, has been laughed at, dismissed, and insulted. And the worst part? I thought love would shield me. I was wrong. Gasps rippled across the room. Guests whispered to each other, unsure if I was joking or serious. Lauren's face drained of color. Her hand flew to her mouth. Carol's eyes narrowed, every muscle in her face taut. I continued. This wedding isn't about us anymore. It's about appearances, about prestige, about ego, and I refuse to let that define my worth or my happiness. Some of the guests shifted uncomfortably, others nodded silently. I didn't care who approved or disapproved. For the first time in months, I felt grounded. Lauren's lips trembled. You can't be serious, she whispered, almost to herself. I stepped closer to the microphone, letting the pause hang. I am, and I am done pretending this is anything but a performance. This marriage, this day, this celebration, it isn't for me, and I refuse to participate any longer. The room went still. The chatter, the clinking of glasses, the soft music, it all stopped, leaving a vacuum filled only by the weight of my words. And in that silence, I realized the moment I feared would ruin everything was the moment I finally freed myself. The moment I stepped back from the microphone, Carol lunged forward, her voice sharp and desperate. He's joking. He's nervous. This isn't serious. Lauren ran toward me, her eyes wide, a mixture of panic and disbelief. You're ruining everything. How could you say that here? Everyone's watching. I turned slowly, locking eyes with her, and spoke with deliberate calm. No, I'm saving myself. The room held its collective breath. Guests shuffled in their seats, whispers ricocheted off the walls, but I stood firm. I could feel the anger, the embarrassment, the shock radiating off Lauren and her mother, but I no longer cared. Carol's face contorted. Do you even realize what you're doing? You're embarrassing her, she hissed, voice trembling. I swallowed, the calm settling into my chest like armor. I don't need your approval. I don't need applause. I need respect, something neither of you has ever offered. Lauren's lips quivered. Please, just don't, she begged. But I stepped over the threshold of compromise I'd been stuck in for months. I dropped the microphone to the polished floor, with a soft thunk that seemed louder than a cannon shot in the silence. And then I walked out. The clicks of my dress shoes echoed down the aisle as gasps and murmurs collided in the room behind me. No one moved. No one called after me. No one clapped. They were speechless, caught between disbelief and shame. Outside, the cool evening air hit my face. I inhaled deeply, tasting freedom for the first time in months. For the first time, I realized I hadn't just walked out of a wedding. I had walked into myself, but I knew the fallout was coming. And it was going to be messy. The fallout hit faster than I expected. Word spread like wildfire. Some guests left immediately, murmuring under their breath. Others stayed, frozen, whispering frantic questions to their neighbors. Lauren's friends looked at me with a mix of awe and horror, and Carol's face was a storm of anger and disbelief. My phone blew up within the hour. Messages ranged from supportive, "Finally someone said it," to vicious, "How dare you humiliate her? You're unstable." Even distant relatives I barely knew had opinions. I scrolled through the notifications with shaking hands, my chest tightening with every alert. I questioned myself. Did I overreact? Did I make a scene? Was I selfish, cruel, or wrong? For days I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the faces at the dinner, the silence, the shock. I felt isolated, like the entire world had turned against me. And yet, deep inside, a flicker of relief persisted. And then something unexpected happened. Messages came from guests who had quietly observed everything, people who had been too polite to intervene, too afraid to speak. Thank you for being honest. I wish I had the courage to do the same. Even a CEO who attended the wedding sent a private note, praising my integrity and offering a professional opportunity. It was a small light in the darkness, but it reminded me that truth, however messy, holds power. Still, the loneliness, the shame, and the heartbreak weighed heavily. I realized this wasn't just about a canceled wedding. It was about confronting a lifetime of being undervalued and dismissed, and finally refusing to be complicit any longer. And yet, as I stared at the ceiling that night, I knew the story wasn't over. Lauren and her mom wouldn't let it end quietly. They were coming for a response. Weeks later, Lauren launched a public campaign I hadn't expected. First, a long Instagram post about losing the love of her life due to a misunderstanding. Then, her mom's Facebook update calling me unstable and immature. Every time I scrolled past the notifications, my chest tightened. I could feel people judging me without knowing the full story. A few days after the posts, Lauren showed up at my apartment. Her eyes were red, and she clutched a bouquet of flowers like a peace offering. I realize my mom's been controlling, she stammered, voice breaking. And I still love you. I want us to work this out. I listened quietly. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I just watched her try to spin months of ridicule into an apology, and then I said calmly, "Loving me means respecting me. You never did. Not then. Not now." She paused, searching my face, hoping for a crack, for some sign that I might forgive her. But there wasn't one. I let her words hang in the air. Let her feel the weight of her choices. She left eventually, slamming the door softly behind her. The bouquet wilted on the counter. Silence settled over the apartment, heavy but cleansing. For the first time in months, I felt a strange peace. I hadn't humiliated anyone publicly. I hadn't screamed, I hadn't raged. I had simply stood my ground. And in that moment, I realized the power wasn't in making them feel small. It was in refusing to let them diminish me anymore. The public drama continued online for a while, but it no longer affected me. I'd crossed the line from fear to freedom, and nothing could pull me back. I could finally start breathing again. I moved into a new apartment a few blocks away from the chaos, carrying only what mattered, my essentials, my dad's old toolbox, and a sense of self I hadn't felt in years. Every box unpacked felt like a small victory, a reclaiming of space that had once been invaded by judgment and mockery. I started therapy, talking through the months of manipulation, the subtle digs, the outright insults that had eroded my confidence. It wasn't easy. Some mornings I woke up feeling hollow, replaying the rehearsal dinner, Lauren's laughter, her mother's contempt. But slowly, clarity seeped in. I began to separate their toxicity from my worth. I took my dad on a road trip we had always joked about but never had time for. A weekend in the mountains, just the two of us. His laughter, low and unrestrained, reminded me of simpler times, of the lessons he'd drilled into me: integrity, patience, self-respect. We shared meals, campfires, and long drives without a single mention of Lauren or Carol. For the first time, I noticed the small joys again: the smell of rain on asphalt, the satisfaction of cooking a meal I enjoyed, and the quiet moments of reflection without judgment. Real love, I realized, lifts you up. It never humiliates or demands conformity to someone else's ego. I even reconnected with friends I had lost touch with, people who appreciated me for who I was, not what I could provide. Their warmth filled the void I had felt for months, reminding me that community and loyalty exist outside toxic family bonds. I felt lighter, stronger, like I'd shed a layer of fear I didn't know was suffocating me. And though I knew the echoes of the wedding debacle would linger, I no longer feared them. I had walked away not just from a wedding, but from everything that had tried to define me. The world was wide open. Months later, I found myself at a friend's wedding, sitting quietly at a table with people who genuinely liked me, not because of status, not because of appearances, but because I was myself. Conversations flowed, laughter came easily, and for the first time in a long while, I felt no tension, No pressure, no judgment. Someone asked why I was single, and I smiled. Because I know what I'm worth, I said, simple and matter of fact. Their faces registered surprise, admiration, maybe even envy. But for me, it was liberating. I didn't need to explain, justify, or hide. I thought back to the rehearsal dinner, the gasps, the silence, Lauren's trembling lips, and Carol's shocked glare. I realized that day wasn't a loss, it was a revelation. I hadn't canceled a wedding out of spite. I had canceled it to save myself, to preserve my dignity, my values, and my future. I whispered a quiet thanks to my dad, who had always believed in me, even when I doubted myself. I thought about the months of fear, guilt, and uncertainty I'd endured, and I realized how far I'd come. Life had not punished me for standing up. It had rewarded me with freedom. With clarity, with peace. I didn't have to beg for respect, approval, or love from those who never intended to give it. That night, I danced, laughed, and celebrated. Not a wedding, but a personal victory. A triumph over manipulation, mockery, and the slow erosion of self-worth. And I understood. I didn't lose a wedding. They lost a good man. The thought made me grin wider than I had in months. In the quiet aftermath, I found myself reflecting on everything, the humiliation, the betrayal, the months of stress, and the courage it took to finally walk away. I realized healing isn't about proving anything to anyone else. It doesn't require their applause, their recognition, or even their understanding. It's personal, messy, and deeply liberating. I thought about Lauren and her mom, still scrambling to control the narrative online, posting stories, subtle digs, and half-truths. And I didn't care. Their opinions, once so heavy, now felt like whispers in a storm I had already survived. I was no longer tethered to their judgment. I started rebuilding life on my terms. I prioritized my own happiness, my friendships, and my passions that had been buried under months of trying to appease others. Mornings became mine, coffee, sunrise walks, and quiet reflection. Nights were mine too. No stress, no tension, no forced smiles. Just peace. I learned that self-respect is louder than any wedding toast. That leaving a toxic environment isn't betrayal. It's survival. That boundaries aren't cruel, they're necessary. And the people who matter will stay. The rest are just background noise. Sometimes I still replay the rehearsal dinner in my mind, the hush, the shock, the realization that I finally stood up for myself. And I smile, not out of malice, but from pride, relief, and clarity. I walked away from a wedding, yes. But more importantly, I walked back to myself. Free. Whole. Empowered. And that's a victory no one can take away, no matter how loudly they shout.